friend Don Costa introduced him. He became his producer. So we were down in Miami. He's doing a movie. He calls me up. He says, "Kid, come on, have dinner." I go and have dinner with him. This is like 67.
He prevailed on May 5, 1955. Los Angeles was his choice. He had $200. He hitched an 18-kilometer ride to Modern Records while staying with his Uncle Morris in Hawthorne. Without an appointment, he attempted to audition. He left with a demo and saw the Capitol Records Tower for the first time, but they said no. One day, he promised himself he will be within it. Paul surprised his parents that Christmas. He had no desire to return to school. He desired New York. "All right," his dad, Andy, responded. He granted him a half year to obtain a record contract. He was required to return and work at Locanda full-time if he failed. Paul loaded 2 luggage and $500 onto a CPR train on January 1st, 1956. The travel to Grand Central took 16 hours. He went to ABC Paramount to try out for Don Costa on day 53 of his 6-month deadline. He sung Diana. Picking up the phone, Costa dialed Andy's number in Ottawa. "A million sellers were just written by your boy," I said. Paul didn't return to work at the restaurant. He had one tune in 5 minutes by 1957. That was all. He displayed a demo of Diana in front of Don Costa. Costa heard the opening verse. After that, he halted him and summoned everyone to the room. Paul had a contract by the end of that hour. They gave him $0. 2 for each record, which is twice what new vocalists typically receive. The label was covered by the story. Any unexpected hit was referred to as a 5-minute miracle after that day. Diana was recorded in RCA Studio B on May 19, 1957. In July, it was released. No posters, no advertisements. It was broadcasting on 83 stations 3 weeks later. It reached the top spot in 6 nations by September. In 18 months, 9 million copies were sold. It held the top spot for 9 weeks in Britain alone. There, it sold 1.25 million copies, outselling all other genres except rock. To keep up with demand, 2 vinyl plants in Edmonton, Canada operated around the clock. Paul secured a gig in Ottawa prior to the song's success. It happened on October 28, 1956. The Capitol Theater was the location. The crowd, however, turned against him. He was allegedly lip-syncing. They jeered him. Coins were thrown. He bolted from the stage. He told the promoter, "I'm never going to sing in this town again." For 25 years, he fulfilled that pledge. It wasn't until 1981 that the city handed him the key to Ottawa that he returned. He claimed his boyhood had been destroyed that night. Paul was flying constantly by 1959. He has 146,000 kilometers on his passport. Sydney in March, London in January, Havana shortly before Castro came to power, Tokyo in June. He made $15,000 a night, but at the age of 17, he still required a guardian to co-sign his shows. He made more than Sinatra on certain evenings. In an attempt to get him to bend over and touch their nation's soil, his followers threw shoes onto the stage in response to their loud cries. Paul wasn't merely singing, but because of him, that high heels had to be banned in Cuba. He was getting to know the industry. He renegotiated in 1958 after realizing that European record deals paid more. In the U.S., he received 1.5 cents, while abroad, he received 3 cents. Additionally, he insisted on maintaining his publishing rights. He began performing spanca music at the age of 17. This meant that he, not the record label, received the money each time someone performed Diana, Lonely Boy, or subsequently My Way. His tunes brought in $2. $5 million by the age of 18. He purchased a Montreal apartment complex and a bar in Las Vegas with the funds. Although he owned both, he was not allowed to legally drink at either location. On August 17, 1960, 4 young lads from Liverpool took the stage at a dimly lit Hamburg club. Even though no one knew their names, they underwent a transformation night after night and show after show. It was the birth of the Beatles. Together with the Rolling Stones, they achieved 8 #1 hits in the UK in just 3 years. And Paul Anka vanished as they flew. His new songs were all failures. They didn't even make it into the top 20. After reducing his studio funding, his label ABC Paramount fired him. Younger voices were what they claimed to seek. Anka was only 21. 13 million singles had been sold by him just 3 years prior. However, his numbers had drastically declined by the spring of 1963. For 2 consecutive quarters, fewer than 1 million recordings were sold. That was a drop of 80%. The radio also turned its back. When's New York played him 28 times a week in 1960. They had only performed him 3 times by May 1963. The Beatles received 55 in the same month. Teen idols became popular almost immediately after. He was already considered outdated before Anka was even 22. The majority of singers would have disappeared. Anka didn't. In December 1962, he entered ABC's New York office and did something outrageous. He purchased back every song he had ever recorded with them and gave them a $250,000 cashier's check, which is now worth almost $2.05 million. The executives chuckled. The total revenue from his back catalog was less than $40,000 annually. Anka knew better than to call it a waste. There have already been 31 foreign covers of such tunes. With new licenses, he would now receive 100%. His catalog reached $15 million by 1970 thanks to Pepsi advertising and reissues of Diana and Put Your Head on My Shoulder. The same catalog brought in almost $100 million by 2020. He had handwritten one little note on the initial contract, which covered all subsequent versions. That one line assured there would never be any additional fees for CDs, downloads, or streaming. He took a plane to San Juan for the movie The Longest Day at the beginning of 1963. He met model and former Miss Sweden runner-up Anne de Zagheb on site. He sent proposals with red-eye tickets and sent her letters from airports for the following year. And they took a plane to Paris on February 16, 1963, and were married at 2 in the morning. Inside the VIP lounge at Orly Airport, the guests drank Dom Perignon in 1955. Maxim sent their wedding cake by plane. A telegram from Frank Sinatra said, "Child, you're crazy, but mazel tov." It included 4 pages in Life magazine. 200 pearls were hand-sewn into her outfit. A 12-piece orchestra from Lilito performed a live rendition of Put Your Head on My Shoulder as the backdrop for their first dance. They had 5 daughters and remained married for 37 years. In 2000, they split up. Anka wrote a 32-bar military march in 48 hours for The Longest Day in 1962, a month before the wedding. The movie had a $7.05 million budget. For $1, he consented to act in it. The producer paid him 0.25% of the worldwide gross in lieu of compensation. The movie generated $30. $5 million in its first year after being released on September 25, 1962. His acting pay was 1,900 times Anka's portion, which came to $76,000. The Oscar went to the march. The song was adopted by NATO. His song was being played in military parades from Ottawa to Oslo by 1965. Anka signed a 6-week contract with the Sands in Las Vegas in November of that same year, 1963. He wasn't even 23. Now he was the town's youngest single headlining act. He had been coached by Sammy Davis Jr. Teen Ballads Are Over. Go Big. Anka breached casino rules by touching hands, strolled into the audience during Cole Porter's closing, and opened with his Night and Day. His salary, $2,500 per night. He hadn't received so much money from ABC in a month. Critics paid attention. He was described by Variety as a teenage troubadour who became a Rat Pack protégé. He had 2 residences in the Sahara and the Sands by the spring of 1964. The contemporary pop star Vegas residency was something he had created. By 2025, he would make headlines there more than 2,000 times. Then something unexpected happened. In October 1962, Johnny Carson was on the verge of taking over The Tonight Show. Anka played an old song, Toot Sweet. In return for half the royalties, he offered Carson half the credit. 5 nights a week, that little 90-second theme was played. For 30 years, it played 1.4 million times throughout time. Each show brought in about $200. Anka's annual income ranged from $800,000 to $900,000. It earned him almost $22 million over 30 years. He used to joke that those checks covered everything from weddings to college to even the groom's suit. He claimed that the 1992 finale of the show was like losing a family member. Anka took a gamble on Broadway in 1964. What Makes Sammy Run's lead had resigned. Anka took over on February 27. He was 22. His critics questioned him. Is a pop star portraying a ruthless Hollywood entrepreneur? However, he managed to perform 8 gigs in 3 weeks without missing a single one. The box office increased by 18%. In just 17 days, he committed 14 songs and 210 pages of conversation to memory. The record still features Anka on the cover, even though the show stopped in June 1965. Only the one who saved it, not the original star. 8 Broadway shows are easier than 2 midnight sets in Tahoe, he subsequently remarked. Anka resumed writing in 1970. He wrote, "She's a Lady for Tom Jones." While confined to a hotel room in New York on July 23, he spent less than 3 hours on it. When it was released on January 9, 1971, it peaked at number 2 on the Billboard charts. Me and Bobby McGee by Janis Joplin was the only song to keep it off the top. It peaked at number 1 on Cashbox and in Canada. By Christmas, 5 million copies had been sold globally. Anka's royalties totaled $2 million. He altered the lyrics for a duet in 2013 after confessing that he detested them and felt they were excessively misogynistic. However, it demonstrated that he was still able to write hits in 1971, even for different voices. Life at home remained chaotic. Alexandra in 1966, Amanda in 1968, Alicia in 1970, Anthea in 1971, and Amelia in 1977 were the 5 daughters he and Anne reared. Everywhere they lived, a cliffside home in Carmel close to Clint Eastwood, a palace in Vegas, and a brownstone in New York. The road made it difficult for Anne to have the girls attend only one school a year. According to tour stops, they would switch coastlines in the middle of the year. Alexandra recalled following royalty statements to determine her father's whereabouts. All 5 daughters, however, received their college degrees prior to Anka's 50th birthday. Beside his gold records, he framed their diplomas. Evidence that BMI and TAZ may coexist, he claimed. Frank Sinatra had supper at the Fontainebleau Hotel in February 1968. He was 52. Anka was 27 years old. "Kid," Sinatra said, looking across the table, "I'll give up after one more album." Everyone fell silent. The Rat Pack gang, the mob people, and even Sinatra's former bodyguard. "You never wrote me that song," he informed Anka. He remembered that line. On June 13, 1971, 3 years later, Sinatra would declare his retirement. However, Anka had already written the return by that point. On February 22 in 1968, Anka was sitting in his New York apartment after returning from Miami. Around 2 a.m., a thunderstorm struck. He filled his IBM Selectric with rolled paper. The rain outside drummed in time. He played Comme d'habitude by Claude Francois on tape. He pictured the voice of Sinatra. He began typing. The finale is now in sight. He had 5 pages by 7 a.m. As he finished, the rain ceased. He dialed Don Costa. "I understand," he said. "Goodbye, Frank." On December 30th, 1968, Sinatra recorded it at Studio One in Hollywood. He completed it in 4 minutes and 35 seconds in a single take. The drummer claimed that everyone in the room felt it as he hit the final curtain line. It was his life, not just a song. Then, in the middle of March 1969, there was the phone call. 4:10 p.m., Anka was called from the studio by Sinatra. "Listen, kid," and stop talking. The phone was held up to the speaker. "I'm afraid I've had a few." And the orchestra grew. Anka sobbed while sitting by herself in his den in Beverly Hills. The single was released on March 15. It peaked at number 27 in July. It spent 75 weeks in the top 40 in the UK. And Anka had released Puppy Love 18 months prior. 1.3 million copies were sold. Everything changed now because of One Stormy Night and 7 Silent Sentences. He became Tin Pan Alley's youngest senior statesman thanks to My Way. However, he forfeited the performer's portion. It was all taken by Sinatra. Only the writer's cut was retained by Anka. By 1974, those royalties, roughly $500,000 annually, surpassed his entire 1957-1967 collection. That's $3.2 million, adjusted for 2025. As he used to say on stage, I created a monster who stole my baby. Still, he got a second act from the song. He went from being a teenage idol to becoming a legacy. He wrote for Tom Jones and Michael Jackson, all because he sensed the end was close one night during a downpour, which gave him a start. The Strip was a secret jungle from 1971 until 1976. Anka referred to it as a toothy honor code. Nothing was more important than loyalty. To be silent was to survive. He saw that Sinatra's guards weren't your typical hotel employees. Men like Johnny Formosa handled it. He was once an enforcer for the Teamsters. He was charged with racketeering in 1973. These dudes were indifferent to autographs. All they cared about was who you knew. Those who discussed Sinatra's fury discreetly stopped attending performances. Their union cards vanished. Anka was once informed by a trombone player that he had received a telegram. Just keep in mind that the stamp stated Hoboken, New Jersey, but there was no name. Sinatra was born and raised there. As the woman rule, Anka also learned about the whispers made by artists. A woman was untouchable if she was a waitress, girlfriend, member of Sinatra's inner circle, or even a reporter. Following a cocktail party at the Sahara in 1974, a young comedian praised Sinatra's date, but only for her scent. The comic's 3-month lounge reservation vanished the following day. People began warning one another, if you break that rule, you're out. Seating arrangements at Sinatra's dinners even left 2 chairs empty between him and his date, a peaceful border no one ventured to cross. A conflict was then sparked by a song. Anka's duet with Odia Coates, You're Having My Baby, peaked at number 1 on August 24, 1974. It wasn't only a hit, though. Outrage ensued. He was selected the Male Chauvinist Pig of the Year by Miss Magazine. He received a Keep Her in Her Place award from the National Organization for Women, Wayne. The line that commended a woman for not getting an abortion was just a year after Roe v. Wade and protesters marched outside radio stations. People were incensed. Nevertheless, the song sold quickly. In 8 weeks, 1 million copies were produced. On-air Chicago DJ Bob Dearborn read irate letters. Nothing was stopped. Feeling the heat, Anka occasionally performed live singing Our Baby. However, the original version held the top spot for 3 weeks. CNN.com conducted a survey in 2006. Voters deemed it the worst pop song ever produced. Nevertheless, it demonstrated that a song that lasted 2 minutes and 49 seconds could divide a country and still be a hit. There was a plan behind all the drama. Anka was candid as he promoted his live CDs in 1975. You must determine what they desire and provide it to them, he stated. Packaging is the key. He studied top 40 radio because he had been largely silent in the 1960s. He saw John Denver and Jim Croce getting up. In order to get a country feel, he traveled to Muscle Shoals, wrote lyrics about family, and joined up with Odia Coates to capitalize on the duet trend. Bland. It was successful. He sold 5 million singles, achieved 4 top 10 successes in the United States, and signed a new record deal with United Artists between August 1974 and May 1976. $1 million, 3 albums. For someone who hadn't placed in the top 10 since 1961, that was significant. He was criticized for being phony. He was indifferent. I'm running a business, not a youth movement, he told Stereo Review. However, the family side suffered while the business flourished. That is revealed in his memoirs from 2013. Between 1974 and 1981, he traveled over 150 nights annually. At his daughter Amanda's school recital, he once slept off. From Caesars, he had taken an overnight flight. He remembered that moment. 1976 hotel logs demonstrate that he only stayed at his California residence for 48 nights. His marriage was impacted by the strain. And his wife sued for divorce twice. In 2000, they got divorced. The guilt turned into gasoline. Originally, Times of Your Life was a Kodak commercial, but he made it into a whole song after hearing letters from his 5 daughters pleading with him to stay at home. In January 1976, it peaked at number 7. The irony? He was so absent that the song got popular. Later, he remarked, "It felt like a punch from my own conscience to hear it in the limo on the way to another airport." The recording that no one was intended to hear then arrived. A furious horn player put a Sony cassette recorder under the mixer following a week-long performance in the summer of 1985. He made a record. He managed to record 11 minutes and 17 seconds of unadulterated fire. Anka was furious. He yelled, "The guys get shirts, no t-shirts on my stage." The warning then appeared. The band had 72 hours to prepare or depart. For years, the tape was kept under wraps. However, it was digitized by an engineer and posted on a music forum in 2004. It spread quickly. It received 150,000 downloads in 3 days. Something private had become public. Anka's irate motivational speech became legendary. The phrases were also familiar to musicians who had never collaborated with him. One line caught my attention. "The only significant person on that stage is me." That was in the middle of a tirade. No. "I don't care if it's Jesus Christ," he yelled as well. "It's the highway if you don't do it my way." The music stand splintered from the force of his slam. Members of the band began making jokes about it. Those words were printed on shirts distributed by tour buses. During rehearsal in 1986, 2 trumpet players chuckled. Anka gave them each a $50 fine. He meant it. The room was dominated by his microphone. It wasn't just music circles that heard the cassette. Hollywood heard about it. It was discovered by screenwriters David Levian and Brian Koppelman in 2005 while they were working on Ocean's 13. They utilized Anka's precise remarks to describe Willie Bank, the antagonist in Al Pacino's film. Even the delay before the phrase hammer was mimicked by Pacino. When the film was released on June 7, 2007, the musicians in the theater chuckled. They were aware that it was the famous Anka recording. Not everybody chuckled. Anka was questioned about the leak by NPR Fresh Air on October 24, 2005. He made no hesitation. "I later shot a serpent's eye called the Taper." His tour manager verified off-air that the man's name was removed off the payroll within 48 hours. No farewell, no illusions. It was an obvious message. Loyalty outperformed skill. According to one percussionist who talked to VH1, there's been an unwritten rule ever since. Never. Before and after performances, crew luggage were inspected. Then the action began. In March 1990, after living in peaceful Carmel by the sea for over 15 years, Anka packed up and moved out. He relocated to Los Angeles, 340 kilometers to the south. On April 12, 1990, he paid $3. $6 million for a 5-bedroom home in Benedict Canyon, according to the records. He claimed it was because his teenage daughters could attend better schools and be nearer to elite session players. However, there was more. Hollywood was what he desired. Within 18 months, he appeared in the new Bel Air Prince and composed music for the television series Hearts Are Wild. Anka continued to move on despite the outbursts, the controversies, and the altercations. His ambition never left his stage, and his rhythm was reinvention. Long before all of this, Paul Anka married Anka Zagheb in Paris on February 16, 1963. She was a model for fashion. They raised 5 daughters over a 37-year period. Anka, on the other hand, gave 300 shows annually. He lived in California in the 1990s while writing for Celine Dion and traveling on red-eye flights. She had moved into another Beverly Hills home by the time of their 38th anniversary. They filed for divorce in March 2001. In October, it was finalized. They had been married for 13,880 days. In his book, My Way, Anka acknowledged his mistakes. He skipped school functions, birthdays, and even dozed off during a performance. To wake him, Anne had to flick his ear, he remarked. "I was the guest star in my own home." He attributed it to the continuous travel. Then, he referred to the divorce as my career's most expensive encore. Anka met Anna Oberg, a Swedish Miss Universe finalist, 6 months after the breakup. He was 60 years old. Her age was 31. Puerto Rico is where they first met. Ethan, their son, was born in Los Angeles on September 22, 2005. They were married at Anka's house on July 8, 2008. But problems quickly arose. Oberg made two 911 calls. Once over money, once over a quarrel over nannies. Anka filed for divorce on December 31, 2009, which was only 531 days after the wedding. In April 2010, it was completed. The passport fear followed. Oberg and Ethan attempted to depart the country without authorization. At last, the system detected it. Anka fought for custody in court, spending over $1 million. Oberg accused him of controlling when she could visit their kid by utilizing private jets. Judge Frederick Bird made the decision in Anka's favor on July 3, 2017. Ethan was 11 years old. According to the judge, the youngster had grown to despise his mother, and it may be harmful to make him visit her. He could not even be called by Oberg. According to her, it was justice for the wealthy. Even though Anka claimed to make $300,000 a month, the court granted him complete legal and physical custody. Experts in family law referred to it as the decade's most unfair ruling. On October 22, 2016, Anka got married once more. His age was 75. Lisa Pemberton was the bride. They had been together for 6 years. It was a spectacular wedding. In Beverly Hills, he booked out the 4 seasons. Among the guests were Steve Wynn and Warren Buffett. The bride was escorted down the aisle by his 11-year-old son, Ethan. The floor was covered with 600 white roses. Because Anka's prenuptial agreement was 43 pages long, longer than his 1962 album Young, Alive, and in Love, everyone signed non-disclosure agreements. He wrote, "Today I married an incredible woman on Instagram, my life's love." But by the middle of 2020, things had changed. Quietly, the marriage ended. Anka attributed it to the continuous traveling. The divorce was finalized on April 1, 2021. On stage, he still dons the platinum wedding band. It reminds him to maintain his humility, he claims. Anka published his memoirs in 2013. My Way was the name of it. A light reminiscence was anticipated by the publishers. 368 pages of fire were what they received. David Dalton co-authored the book. Anka's voice recordings, recorded at 3 in the morning while fueled by espresso, provided the most of it. Bus transportation. Crazy confessions were made. A white dancer nearly led Sammy Davis Jr. away the night before JFK inauguration. Angie Dickinson famously drove 60 miles per hour down Sunset Boulevard and performed a sex act on Burt Bacharach. And Michael Jackson once urged Anka to ghostwrite love letters to Brooke Shields. The attorneys requested the removal of 42 sections. Rather than cut the mob stories, Anka refused. He even mentioned how, after seeing an early demo of My Way, Chicago boss Sam Giancana gave him $50,000 in chips. Within 72 hours, the initial printing of the book was sold out. In response, Sinatra's estate sent a chilly 3-sentence fax. Then a fresh chapter began in 2024. Paul Anka's Way made its Toronto International Film Festival debut on September 12. John Maggio was the director. Critics were talking about a moment that wasn't from the archives. It was in real time. Before a performance in the Tokyo Dome, cameras followed Anka backstage. He was 83. "Tell me if the encore kills me," he replied, passing his pocket ECG monitor to his cardiologist.